now settle back and have a listen to a fantastic story of a guy who's defied the odds, not only for himself but for a lot of other people. It's really motivational stuff, this. This is an interview with a guy called Talon Skills Piggins, who runs a charity called the Bike Experience. I'll let it speak for itself. Here we go. You're listening to BikerFM.co.uk with me, Roger Tewson, and tonight I am very pleased to be able to introduce my very special guest, a gentleman by the name of Talon Skills Piggins. Talon is the founder of a charity called the Bike Experience. Back in 2003, Talon was very unfortunate to be involved in a motorcycle accident, which left him paralysed, and he became a wheelchair user. However, that didn't stop him from getting on with his life, because he's carved quite a successful career as a Paralympic skier, and up until his retirement at the end of 2011 was the current, or the European skiing Super G skiing champion 2010-2011. He now turns a living as a motivational speaker, and also runs the Bike Experience. Now, the Bike Experience, I think, Talon, welcome to the show. First of all, I'm very grateful that you can find the time to be with us this evening.
Thank you.
Perhaps you would like to explain the Bike Experience. I did mention a little bit last week's show, but obviously, as the guy who started it all up, perhaps you'd like to let us know what the Bike Experience is all about.
Well, the Bike Experience came about as a result of 3 years ago me deciding that I wanted to get back on a motorbike. Having been a motorcyclist for many years, I was missing out on the excitement and the freedom that a motorcycle offers everyone. And those of us that ride bikes, you've got that inner feeling, that inner pleasure, enjoyment and thrill that you get
absolutely
being out there on the road.
Yes.
Now, I knew that the road probably wasn't going to be a good idea to go back on, having been involved in a very unpleasant accident, which was the cause of me becoming a wheelchair user. So I went out, bought myself a bike, I adapted it, and then I went to a disused airfield, tried to give it a go, fell off. I went to Castle Combe, sought their advice, fell off a little bit more, but finally got going. And once I was riding around the track, you just couldn't stop me from smiling, and it was the best day that I'd had since being paralysed. And I just couldn't describe the feeling of happiness and the feeling of sort of escapism from the prison that had become sort of, my life, this wheelchair. I was stuck in it. I couldn't get out of it. Well, all right, I'm not stuck in it. I do get out of it to go to bed, and I do get into my car and that sort of things. But you're still pushing everywhere. But suddenly, to be sat on top of the bike and riding around, just like any other rider on the track, was the most wonderful, wonderful feeling. And sort of last year, I thought, well, I want other people to have the same experience. And so with myself and a friend called Russ and a friend called Helena, we got together and we decided to see if we could help other people within a similar sort of situation to get them back on a bike and to get them to experience the enjoyment again. And so we created the Bike Experience. And in April 2011, our first rider to come along was a chap called Scott Hillier. He'd been paralysed 5 years ago as a result of a motocross accident. We had a fairly sort of basic remit and a fairly basic bike for him to use. We had an old 1998 GSXR 600 SRAD.
Sorry, say that again? A GSXR 600?
Yeah, SRAD. Well, I thought it was easy to start off with a 600 because I decided to ease myself back into riding a bike with a GSXR 1000 K6. possibly not the most clever idea to try and ease yourself back into riding with a 170 brake horsepower bike. Yeah, a lot of friends thought I was a little bit mad, not just to get back on a bike, but to buy one that was so powerful.
See, it's funny. Now, I don't know whether this is a common reaction from able-bodied people such as myself, because as soon as you said, we had this guy come along, and the first bike he jumped on was a GSXR 600. Now, I don't know whether I'm being snobbish or from an able-bodied point of view, but I was like, oh my God, what, a GSXR 600? He's been paralysed and he's not been on a bike for 5 years, and you're going to stick him on that on a racetrack. My immediate reaction is something like a sit-up and beg CB250 or something like that, but that's obviously not the way you operate.
No, we realised that the GSXR was basically the handlebars are too low. So yes, we did want something that's a little bit more sit-up. So we've now evolved our teaching, and whilst we started off in April last year teaching one person how to ride, when we finished in October, we actually had 4 riders for one event. I had bought the bikes, adapted them, so we increased our stable, as it were, of bikes. Yeah. So the first bike everybody gets on is an adapted SV650. It's a 1998 little old curvy model with raised bars, so that people are sat a lot more upright. And the problem that a lot of high-level injuries, so my level of injury is T4, and for those of you who don't know what that means, it's basically I'm paralysed from the nipple line downwards, so I have no stomach muscles, I have no core stability, so when I lean forwards, I fall forwards. So when I'm leaning forwards on a bike, all my weight goes through the handlebars because I can't sit up. Yeah. So we've got the curvy SV650 as the first bike, so that people can start to learn on that sat upright, and then once they've been riding around in the paddock for a little bit, we then move them on to another bike, and we've got various ones that we can use, and we've got a plan for this coming year to continue using SV650s. Okay. We find that they're a good little bike, they're lightweight, they've got good torque. When you're first getting back on a bike, you don't want you wouldn't want a frantic bike to be riding around a track. Yeah, I would imagine you want something fairly mellow. Yeah, and so you get but tractable. Yeah, because you can get the bike up to 4th gear and just leave it there, and you just roll on and off the throttle because it's got great engine braking. Yeah, and good low down torque for the V-twin. Yeah, of course. Yeah, you can just sit there and ride it without changing gear. So it's a good introduction back into riding. I would imagine that many of the people who approach you for advice and would like to come and try to get back on a bike are incredibly nervous. Yeah. And I imagine that you and your colleagues who teach and instruct and train these guys have to deal with a lot of fear. We do. The demons are pretty hard to overcome, and we have had a few people that came along and the demons were just too strong for them. They were able to cope with the paddock area stuff that we were doing, but when it got to going out on the track, it just wasn't going to happen for them. So we want them to come back and try again, because we can just focus on getting stuff back in the paddock. And what we say to them is that they certainly haven't failed in any shape or form, because they had enough courage to put a set of leathers on and get back on a bike, and quite often it's due to a motorbike that they're in a wheelchair for in the first place. Yeah, I can imagine that. I mean, I've been involved in a couple of fairly serious accidents, and through a thin scraping of luck and the grace of God, I've come out of it okay, but it could have been very close. And I've had that fear to deal with in regaining my confidence for speed and cornering and road positioning and so on and so forth. I can't begin to imagine the levels that some of the guys that you speak to must be dealing with. And for some of them, the sort of the fear has been compounded by the fact that they haven't been back on a bike for a long time.
Not even as a pillion.
Yeah, I mean, the longest we've had is a chap who was off a bike for 37 years. I mean, and he, however, was dreaming about getting back on a bike. But we've had people, well, there's been, I think, 4 of them that have been off a bike for over 30 years. And see them get back on a bike after that amount of time and to be riding again and to see the look of pure enjoyment on their faces at the end of it is a massive, massive boost. And it's so we have quite a lot of volunteers that come to help us with the bike experience. I mean, all of us are volunteers that run it, and then you've got what we call the launch crew who come to help with the riders and their riding. And people come back time and time again because of the rewards that they get. They're giving something back to our biking community, and sometimes the biking community maybe forgets about the darker side of motorcycling because people sometimes don't want to face it.
No, we don't want. No, we don't want to. Sorry. Yeah, I mean, I can understand that. We don't like to think. Perhaps we don't think enough about the darker side, and that's an interesting description because it is the darker side. I think the danger. I think a lot of us do tend to push that away to one side. Yeah. But for people who have had life-changing incidences, when they try to go back to the project or whatever it was that caused them to have that life-changing incident, it takes on a whole new meaning.
Yeah.
I mean, I can look back on the big accident. My regular listeners would be bored shitless of me talking about my big accident. I had a huge accident in Scotland, nearly killed myself. By the grace of God, I walked away with nothing more than a bruised back and a fractured thumb. But I could have died. I could have been paralysed. I've kind of forgotten about that when I go out on the bike now. But perhaps I should. Perhaps we should. As motorcyclists.
I think that people should realise that well, I think people understand the seriousness of biking, but those people who go out, and it's their choice, and you can do whatever you want, but personally, I would not go out without a full set of leathers on and, my lid on, because I've seen people riding around in the summer with just a helmet on and a pair of shorts and a T-shirt, and you might be the greatest rider in the world, but somebody else could be the cause of you coming off your bike that you have no control over.
Yes. Yeah, exactly.
And
exactly.
I don't want people to end up in a similar situation to me, because I'll tell you honestly, I hate being in a wheelchair. I would give anything to have my legs back. I make most of what I've got left.